Right, so episode 2, Adventures in Fuel Injection. Yeah, as I mentioned in the first episode, the first thing we've got to do is see if we can get some life out of this ECU. So what I've done is I've butchered the main wiring harness of the TT600 to get rid of everything we don't need for this. Just the stuff that directly relates to the engine system. So everything connected through the engine connector is now connected to something. I've connected all the sensors up. So we've got our air temperature sensor, we've got our coolant temperature sensor, there's the crankshaft position sensor, the throttle position sensor, and then I've also added the idle air control valve and plugged in the injectors. So there's quite a lot connected up here at the moment. And the next thing to do is to see if we can connect to the ECU through the diagnostics port and see what's going on with it. For that, we're going to use TuneECU, which is the free software I mentioned previously, and this diagnostics cable, USB style cable. So we'll plug that in and open the TuneECU program. Right. I'll get out of this map or maybe I won't. I can't see a way to shut down the map that's already loaded in here, but it doesn't matter. As for power, I've bunched a few wires together here. I've retained the main solenoid, relay, bunched a bunch of wires together here for positive and a couple together there for negative, and I'm just going to connect them to this universal power supply and set it to 12 volts. Right, so it sets 12 volts, and we'll see what happens when we attempt to power the whole thing up. If we have a look at the TuneECU program at the moment, it is set to use the USB interface. I think it helps to plug it in before you open the program. So in theory, we should be able to connect to the ECU and see what's going on with it. So let's power this thing up, black to black, red to red. Okay. So we're drawing 0.8 amps. We've got a light on our USB cable, and the air control valve cycled, which is a good sign. So let's have a look. If we head for ECU and click connect, and hopefully we see some life. I've got a red flashing. It's flashing yellow now. That's good. That's a good sign. Yeah, it's doing something. We'll head on to the diagnostics page, and we should see, yep, here we go, we're getting some life. So we've got a temperature reading there on the coolant temperature sensor, that's good. It's showing the status of the injectors and the ignition coils, which are obviously not present. It's showing a voltage for the throttle position sensor. In theory, I should be able to see that change. Yeah. I can see the dial, so it is reading the throttle position sensor, so that's good. Yeah, it's got a pressure reading for barometric pressure. Yeah, this temperature here is showing 14 degrees C. I'm assuming that's the the air pressure, the air temperature sensor. So we've got things happening. We've got a few fault codes here, which I would be expecting. Cooling fan, tachometer. Yeah, there's some injector malfunction. Coolant temperature gauge. Check engine light. So yeah, I mean, we'll just reset those. Just reset the error codes and see if they disappear and which ones pop up. There are quite a few things that are not connected, so I would expect to see some error codes from that. Yep, fuel pump relay default. Yeah, that's kind of to be expected as well, since I haven't connected the fuel pump. Yeah. Yeah, well, that injector one's gone, so hopefully that was just something to do with having the power disconnected. As we saw, the idle control valve is definitely working, so I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have a go at... Careful there. I'm going to have a go at... we'll go into the map editor and we'll have a go at reading the map off the ECU and see if there is actually a map loaded on there. Yeah, it's reading something, which is good. 70%, 90%, and done. So, okay, so it's read the map off. So this map we see on the screen now is the map that is currently in the ECU. If we go into the display, switch that off. So this is the main fuel table. All of these can be changed however you want them to. So obviously with the GS550 we aren't going to be revving to 14,000 RPM. So I'll just edit the map accordingly. I think all I'm going to do is try and work out based on torque curves what sort of fuel the GS550 would expect at what RPM compared to the TT600, and then just edit the map accordingly. And then while we're at it, we'll change the rev limiter as well. Then obviously you've got an ignition table as well. So this is for your ignition timing. And then there's various other ignition at idle, depending on temperature. There's all sorts of different maps in here that we can play about with. Warm up, for instance. So yeah, this is just extra fuel required at specific temperatures. So should be fairly easy, I think, to get a map that'll get the engine to run. Whether or not it'll run properly, I don't know. This is something we're going to have to play around with. But for now, I'm going to call this a success. We have managed to communicate with the ECU and read a map off. Next, we try to load a map onto it and make sure it's all working, but I would imagine it is. If you can read it, you can probably load it. And we've tested some of our sensors that seem to be working. So the next thing to do, I think, is to put together a rotor for the crankshaft position sensor to then read, get it spinning, and see if it'll register RPM on the old diagnostics page. See if we can get an RPM reading, and also see if it'll trigger the injectors to fire. I'm not sure if it's going to work yet, but these are the main things to sort out, I think, before we go any further. I have had a look about how all of this is going to connect to the engine and where I'm going to locate things, and there will be some modification required. The engine is in pieces at the moment, so it's not too hard to modify the crankcase to suit the bits I'm installing. But before I even look at that, I'd like to make sure we can just get those injectors to fire at least, and then I know we're in the right direction. So yeah, stay tuned for episode 3. Thanks for watching.